Good evening. I'm Kathy Sullivan, Director of Professional Learning at Hill Learning Center, and I am delighted to welcome you to tonight's Hill Connect webinar. If you're new to this, Hill Connect is our free learning series, and it's designed to share practical, research-based strategies for supporting students who learn and think differently. Our sessions explore topics such as executive function, learning differences, literacy, and ADHD with tools you can use right away. So we invite you to check out our full Hill Connect schedule at hillcenter.org. Tonight, we've invited Peg Dawson to focus on two EF skills, organization and time management. We know both are essential, yet often difficult to maintain. While creating systems and schedules is important and sometimes the easy part, sustaining them can be the real challenge. We're grateful to have tonight's event sponsored by LePage Associates Psychological Services. They are a multi-specialty group practice serving individuals of all ages. LePage offers psychotherapy, educational and psychological evaluations, and psychiatry with evening and weekend hours. Their team understands that families often seek support after trying many approaches, and LePage is committed to helping clients find practical, effective solutions. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Tonight's session, as you just heard, is being recorded, and you're going to receive the recording, the slides, and a brief survey tomorrow that we really hope you'll fill out. We truly do read every one of those and use those to guide our Hill Connect series. Please use the chat feature in Zoom tonight to submit questions at any time. We will receive those, and then we'll address those during the Q&A following the presentation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Peg Dawson. Dr. Dawson is a psychologist, co-author of the Smart But Scattered series, and an internationally recognized expert on executive skills. She has spent decades working with students, families, and schools to develop practical strategies, and she recently partnered with Hill to co-author our online course, Executive Function Skills, Practical Strategies to Support Student Success. We're honored to have her with us tonight to share her expertise. And Dr. Dawson, I pass it on to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to be here, especially to talk about these two particular executive skills, because one of them is my strongest skill and the other is my weakest skill. So I'm going to speak from personal experience. Before I start talking about organization and time management specifically, though, let me just share with you, if you're not familiar with our overall model. I sometimes call this the smart but scattered model. These are the 11 skills that we focus on in our work supporting kids with executive skill challenges. And as you can see there, we divide them into two groups: foundational skills and advanced skills. Foundational skills are the ones we emphasize, particularly with kids during the elementary school years, whereas the advanced skills are ones that develop later. And I think it's more relevant to address them, at least in the way I'm going to tonight, with middle and high school students. If you have a younger child, you may still be able to get some ideas, but one of the things that I think is important to understand about the advanced skills is that these are more complicated skills than the foundational skills. They do take time to develop, and in fact, they are really facilitated by the last executive skill on that list, which is metacognition. And I would just want to explain metacognition briefly before we get into organization and time management. The throwaway definition for metacognition is that it means thinking about thinking, which I'm not even sure what to do with. So I've refined that definition to make more sense to me, and also to take into account the developmental perspective, because once kids acquire metacognition, their brains change pretty dramatically. And that metacognition tends not to develop much before middle school, and maybe even well after middle school. So here's my definition of metacognition. Metacognition is the awareness that you have thoughts, and that you can use those thoughts to solve problems, make sense out of things, understand the world, and understand yourself. So obviously kids have thoughts from an early age. And in the early stages of language acquisition, all they're thinking is out loud. And then it goes underground. We call that internalized speech. But although they have thoughts from an early age, what they don't have is any clear awareness that they can use their thoughts as tools. Once they understand that, you will see a bump in all those other advanced skills, including organization and time management, because now they can use their thoughts to plan and prioritize, to create organizational systems, to manage time, and to set goals. Uh, so that's the other thing I want to make. The other point I want to make before I get into talking about organization and time management specifically is that those skills are built on the foundational skills that and so and they're interconnected. And so even though we'll talk about organization, you're going to see some planning in there. Even though we talk about time management, you're going to see some organization and planning in there. So these skills tend to be interconnected, but I will focus specifically on organization, and we have I think, a pretty clear definition for that in time management. Okay, so let's jump in. This is our definition for organization. It's the ability to create and maintain systems to keep track of information or materials. Now, there's a key word in the definition here. Sometimes when I do live workshops, I ask people to indicate, to tell me what they think the key word is. And what people have different answers. Ability, create, systems are some that are thrown out there. And this is my weakest skill. So my response to that is I am great at creating systems of organization because every 4 weeks I have to come up with another system to keep my study clean because the last one didn't work. So clearly the key word is maintain, right? And if you have ever tried to turn a disorganized kid into an organized kid, you know this is a long-term, labor-intensive process. Because it's not just a question of creating a system and handing it off to the kid and expecting them to run with it. And because everybody's organizational system seems to be unique to them, it's a better way, but even this doesn't work so well, is to say to the kid, you know what, your backpack's a mess. You can't find your homework when you need to do it, and you can't find it when you need to hand it in. So let's take your backpack apart and figure out a way to organize the materials in a way that works for you so that you can find stuff when you need to find it. And there you can see that connection between organization and time management. If you can find stuff quickly, then you're not wasting time, right? Okay. So again, we need to understand that this is a skill that may take time to develop. And actually, now I'm going to ask you a question, and if people can respond in chat. Actually, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. How many of you attending this webinar consider yourselves to be pretty organized? If you want, you can use the emoji, the thumbs up emoji. I couldn't locate it on my Zoom account, but if not, put a little check mark or put a yes in chat just so I can get a feel. A thumbs up. Okay, so all right, so we got a lot of organized people. This is great. All right, now here's the next question. How far back do you remember being that way? This you'll have to type your answer in. So how far back those of you who think of yourselves as being pretty organized, how far back? We get always, we get forever, elementary school for as long as I can remember. I love it. These are the answers I get when I do a live audience. The ones that come up the most are forever, as long as I can remember, or as far back as I can remember, or whatever. So when I do this with with a live audience, usually about 30 to 40% of the audience raises their hand. And so I started out describing organization as an advanced skill. For those of you who remember being organized as far back as the beginning, this is not an advanced skill for you, right? This is a skill that you were probably born with. I mean, there's a high genetic component to executive skills anyway. So it may well be that you come from other organized people. Um, so, so what that means is because you are naturally organized, you didn't have to work to develop systems of organization. For those people who are not naturally organized, and again, if I said 30 to 40% of my audiences raise their hand and say they're highly organized and have been forever, that means 60 to 70% of my audiences are not highly organized for as far back as they can remember. I've done this with high school kids. Actually, I was working in a high school in Littleton, Massachusetts. For some reason, I was talking with 10th graders. And I asked them, how many of you in here think of yourselves as being pretty organized? And about 30 to 40% of that audience raised their hand. And then I said, how far back do you remember being that way? And again, the typical answer was forever, as far back as I can remember. I remember there's a 10th grade girl sitting in the front row. And she mentioned that she could remember at the age of 2 lining up her shoes in her bedroom. I almost said to her, could you come to my bedroom and line up my shoes? Because I haven't learned that skill yet. So keep in mind that if you are living with someone who's not highly organized, this is an advanced skill. It is not easy to develop, but it takes time and practice, consistency. And on top of that, I think there are a couple of things that distinguish people who are organized from people who are disorganized by nature. I really think one of the differences between us is that people who are highly organized, uh, they respond to visual cues differently than those of us who are disorganized. So that if they're in a cluttered environment, that bothers them. Those of us who are disorganized, we may not even notice the clutter. Or we may say, yeah, it looks kind of messy. I'll get to it tomorrow. It just doesn't bother us. I think really last month I was in the middle of doing a webinar in this very room. And as it took a break, I got up and I noticed there were like 2 pairs of dirty socks on the floor. Obviously out of sight, but I thought, and they've been there for several days. So I've worked hard to get more organized, but you can see those things just sort of slip by me. Um, and actually, let me bring you back to my childhood. Because I have memories of my mother. When I was 4 years old, my mother saying to me, telling me to clean my room. So here's her instructions: clean your room. This is not my bedroom, but it could have been. I just found it online. But that could have been my bedroom when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 17 years old. So when my mom said clean your room, my response was I put a couple of toys away and then I start playing with one. Or I'd pick up an item of clothing and then put it down because I don't know what to do with it. Or I'd pick up a book and start reading it. I was a reader, so I could get distracted by any number of things. So those general instructions, clean your room, didn't work for me. Um, so here were and my mother, I think this is another interesting thing. I think my mother was naturally organized. If you are naturally organized, it may be hard for you to understand people who are naturally disorganized. So whatever tools you think you might want to suggest to your disorganized kid, if you are highly organized, it might not work. So you may want to talk to someone like me who's naturally disorganized to find out what strategies we've learned over the years. So here are just a few options that would have worked better for me or for a disorganized kid today than just one set of instructions, clean your room. Here's a checklist. The other thing I realized when because I spent a lot of time thinking about it, how messy my room was throughout my childhood. Um, when my mother said clean your room, that was an open-ended task. Uh, and which is interesting because one of my other executive skill weaknesses is flexibility. So I have trouble handling open-ended tasks. Where do I start? What am I supposed to do? What does it look like? I had none of that. So had my mother handed me some kind of a checklist, make your bed, put your dirty clothes in the hamper, the floor is picked up, clean under the bed, clean the top of the dresser, desk, empty, trash, vacuum. I mean, that's a pretty good description of what would have worked for my bedroom when I was a kid. So giving your kid, even better, have your kid make the checklist for themselves because they may have a better idea what should go on that checklist than you, or work on it together. Another option, use an app. My favorite, and I've just discovered this, is Todoist, which is a free app. I mean, you can buy a paid version with bells and whistles, but I found the free app very useful. And that's my to-do list for tasks I have to do on the left-hand side. But I added a separate section. This is what cleaning my study would look like. Clean off the desk surface, go through inbox 1, go through inbox 2, put books on the bookshelves, pens and pencils in the pencil holder. I mean, that's basically a brief introduction to what it would take to clean my desk. Now let me give you a helpful hint. For people who are disorganized, it is incredibly tedious and effortful to try to clean things up. So if you're working with your kid on this, have them spend 5 or 10 minutes a day on the task until it's done. And then maintain it following the same 5 to 10 minute rule. So for instance, years ago, when I finally, and by years ago, I mean in my 60s. Okay, I'm 76 now. It was in my 60s. So I finally said, okay, I've got to get a handle on my study. And so what I decided to do was I was going to spend 10 minutes a day cleaning my study until it was all cleaned up. So the first day, I set the timer or set the alarm on my phone for 10 minutes. When that bell went off, I thought, that is the longest 10 minutes I have ever spent in my entire life. So the next day I said, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes from now on. And that's what I did. I spent 5 minutes until the study got clean. And I mean, you can talk to your kids if you're helping them with organization. How much do you think you can bear before you got to quit? Can you handle 5 minutes? What do you think about 10 minutes? Can you do 5 minutes, take a break, and then do another 5 minutes? I have a 5 minute rule for just about anything. I mean, that's the way you learn executive skills, is by spending only 5 minutes a day practicing for as long as you need to until it takes. And in fact, in connection with this, around the same time I was getting my study clean, I read this book that suggested, or a reference to a study, was a meta-analysis, which means they took a whole bunch of studies and threw them together to try to get a handle on how long it takes to acquire a habit. That's what the topic was. And basically, the bottom line was it takes 66 days to acquire a habit. So knowing that, once my study was clean, then every day before I would go to bed, I would tidy up the study. It took no more than 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes every day. And I was doing a lot of traveling then, so I couldn't do it every day. I could only do it when I was home. So I would put X's on my calendar and count it up to 66. And although my study has been messy since then, it was never as messy again as when I'd spent 66 straight days tidying my study. Okay. So let me share with you one other strategy. I've never seen this in any self-help book. I've never seen this had anybody who, with professional organizers, for instance, maybe it's out there, but I haven't seen it. But here's how I cleaned my bedroom when I was a kid. I threw everything that needed to be put away in the middle of my bedroom floor. And then I picked up something and I put it away. I picked up another thing and I put it away. And when I started taking seriously the idea of cleaning my study, I did the same thing. Here's a picture. In fact, this is from this morning. I took a card table. I brought it into my study. I set it up and I put everything that was out of place on that card table. And then it probably took me, I was using the Pomodoro technique. It probably took me, 45 minutes to clean all this stuff up. But as you can see, I gave you my instructions earlier. There, you can see inbox number 1, inbox number 2. Actually, I've got 3 inboxes over there. But here's what's interesting about this, and you may be able to entice, your kid to use a similar process, because all the clutter is on the card table. Everything else in my study looks great. That's what I want my study to look like when it's all done. And so I get to see what the final product is going to look like. And then I put stuff away so that, yeah, sure, those inboxes filled up a bit, but no, they weren't overflowing the way they were when I started this morning. Um, but the surface of my desk, you can see I have a big surface. My husband and I used to share it. So, and then he got another study in the house, so it's mine now. So you can see that I was that approach worked for me. And you may be able to use that same strategy for cleaning out backpacks. Take everything out, put them on the table, figure out how you're going to sort them. You can use it for cleaning bedrooms. You can use it for, anything. You could use it for cleaning your garage, my bet is, although that sounds tricky. Okay, so now people have shared with me strategies over the years, and I'm going to ask you all if you have any strategies as well in a minute. So be thinking about this. And one of them that it keeps coming up in all the books is only touch it once. That has never worked for me because half the time I look at it and I see it, but I don't know where to put it. In fact, even taking stuff off that card table today, I picked up something and I thought, oh, I don't know where this goes. So I put it back down again. So the whole only touch it once does not work for me. But about a year and a half ago, I was in I did a workshop at a Christian school in Florida, and we were talking about. It was with teachers, and we were talking about the strategies that teachers were using to help kids with various executive skills. And when we got to organization, this middle school teacher said, "Here's what I tell my kids, both her own kids and the kids in her classroom." She said, "Don't put it down, put it away." I just tell them that. Don't put it down, put it away. So that went into my head, and I thought, I can use that. And I remember getting home from that workshop, and just that night, getting out of my clothes, which typically I would just drop on the floor. And I thought of what she said, don't put it down, put it away. And so again, I'm far more likely to put those clothes away before I go to bed. They certainly are not on the floor. Sometimes I fold them neatly and put them on the bureau, thinking I'll put them away tomorrow. But that process works well. Okay, I see questions in chat, and please feel free to put them in. I'm going to handle them afterwards, just so I make sure I cover all the content I want to cover. So there's the mantra. Don't put it down, put it away. Okay. Actually, if people have other ideas, any other tricks that work for you? In fact, I may address this one now. 5 to 10 minutes a day doesn't seem like a lot when the bedroom looks the way it does in the picture you share, as my teen's room does. How do I teach you to keep it from getting messy again the next day? Yeah, that's a great question. I'd make a deal with her. I would make a deal with her about, okay, how much are you willing to do 5 minutes a day to keep it clean? And every day you get a marble in the jar, and when the jar is full, you get some reward or something like that. Cleaning part of a room at a time, this one corner today. Yes, breaking the room down into segments and sections. That's a great idea. In fact, that reminds me of two other ideas that people have shared with me. This was with younger kids, but again, it could be applicable. One mom told me she took masking tape and she divided her daughter's bedroom into 9 squares, like a tic-tac-toe board, right? And she pointed to the first square and said, okay, that's your job. And then she would help with the other 8 squares. And she gradually increased the number of squares. I had another mom who she said to her daughter, okay, there are 2 jobs when you're room cleaning. There's brains and there's brawn. She said to her daughter, what do you want to do? And the daughter said, I'll be the brains, which is logical. But the mom said, okay, so that means you have to tell me what to do. So the daughter was telling the mom, okay, put the dirty clothes in the laundry or put that in the laundry, whatever it was. The daughter was walking the mom through room cleaning. What was she doing? If you can walk someone else through room cleaning, you're learning how to clean your room. And then halfway through, the mom said, okay, we're going to switch jobs now. I'll be the brains and you be the brawn, which I thought was a lovely idea. For me, with respect to my own room mess, I'm much more efficient just leaving it at night and picking up laundry mess first thing in the morning when I make my bed. It would take, yeah, that's so good. I'm so glad you said that. It would take me 10 times as long at night when I'm tired. That's the other thing. And again, this is something to keep in mind working with kids, especially teenagers as well. We Everybody has their own circadian rhythm. They have their own time in the day when they are most alert, most awake. And I realized I am a morning person. And if I try to do any intellectual task at night, like if I have to create a PowerPoint from scratch, it is going to take me twice as long if I do it in the evening than if I get up in the morning fresh and do it that way. So so glad you made that point. My students have three areas: a place for textbooks, a chair pouch that holds activity class and unit folders, and a third wall pouch that holds everything else that will leave our room. I love that strategy as well, because part of the problem with organization is if we make it each piece too defined, then we may get exhausted before we can do it. If we've got three places to put stuff, first of all, we'll remember where that place is, and maybe we can contain the mess within through those three places. I'm thinking of another strategy, which I learned from a middle school teacher that I've done some work with here in New Hampshire, and she has uh, actually, this is a working memory strategy, but there's a link between working memory and organization. But she suggests that kids have, oh, she has a great name for it, a place right by their door where they put stuff that they know they have to take out or take to school or whatever. She has a whole set of videos, and she has a YouTube channel called Teen Changers. So if you want to go and look at her working memory video, because a lot of it, there's an overlap between working memory and organization. And I realize if something is put away, I'm likely to forget about it. So that's one of the reasons I like things out and visible. That's why I have post-its, the electronic post-its on my computer screen, because if it disappeared, I wouldn't remember it. Um, okay. Prepare clothes and belongings the night before. Yeah, and sometimes I'll do that. That's another idea. Again, take advantage of when your energy level is, or the other thing, and this goes along with habits, and that is routines. A routine is basically a habit. So if you do the same thing for 66 days, it then becomes a routine, and it takes a whole lot less executive skills to follow the routine, right? Think about brushing your teeth. We don't even think about it. We do it just before bed because we've been doing it for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And we don't, again, there's no effort involved in that. We just do it. Um, okay, great strategies, people. This is really helpful. All right, so now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about time management. So we're going to go from my weakest skill to my strongest skill. And I have to admit that with my strongest skill, I had to talk to other people who are not good at time management because I'm pretty naturally good at it. So so the other thing about time management is it's got the earlier executive skills embedded in it. So time management is basically task initiation, sustained attention, and planning. Um, with one additional element that's unique to time management, and that is time estimation. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you some more questions. Okay, you have a choice here. So you're going to choose one, two, or three. I'm curious. I've never asked this of an audience before, so I'm curious to see. Number one, which is most like you? Number one, I routinely underestimate how long it takes to do something and then run out of time, stay up late to finish, ask for an extension, or blow past the deadline. Or two, I tend to overestimate how long a task will take, and I keep putting it off because it feels like it's going to take forever. Or number three, I'm actually pretty good at accurately estimating how long it takes to do something. So let's see what we've got here. Okay, this looks interesting. It looks like it's pretty evenly distributed. I'm going to have to start asking my live audiences this so I can get a sense of we may be back to the 30% who are choosing number three, who are naturally good at it. Again, there may be that genetic component. Um, So with the kids I've worked with, the ones who end up in my office, and many of them referred for because of suspected attention disorders, um, those kids, they're number one more often than not. They underestimate how long it takes to do something. So if it's an assignment, an essay they have to write or a project, they end up, if they're in high school or college, they're pulling an all-nighter, they're asking for extension, they're blowing past a deadline. Um, and I do though see some kids and adults for that matter who do the opposite. They overestimate how long an effortful task was take. I remember years ago testing a third grader whose mom told me every night they fought about math homework. Long knockdown, drag out fights about math homework. The kid could do math. That wasn't the issue. He hated doing the homework. And it finally occurred to the mother that they were spending more time fighting about the homework than it would actually take him to do the homework. And so she said to him, "How long do you think this math worksheet's going to take?" And he said, it's going to take at least an hour, which is a long time in the life of an 8-year-old. But the mom said, "Are you sure? Let's check. Let's see." They wrote down the time he started the homework, the time he finished. It was 10 minutes. He was stunned. He had no idea he could get the homework done that quickly. So, um, so being able to estimate time accurately, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, is our number one strategy for helping people understand time management. But before we go there, I pulled this from a presentation I went to the National Association of School Psychologists a few years ago. They made a number of really good points. I want to share some of them with you. And they talk about procrastination as being the opposite of time management. I usually think of procrastination as being the opposite of task initiation, but that shows you how intertwined they are. Very often, time management is a problem because people are procrastinating, right? So this study looked at a particular population of kids, very bright high school kids, and they collected survey data. So the students they were looking at were kids in AP classes or IB students, International Baccalaureate students. If you're familiar with those, that's the curriculum that's often used in international schools. It's pretty rigorous. So both of those are high achieving students. And here's what the survey showed. When they asked them, um, how how often do you think the average AP or IB student responds to stress by putting off work until the last minute? You can see more than half of them are doing this most of the time, 5 to 6 days a week, or they're doing it almost always, almost every day. So it's a stress response, but unfortunately, when you put off work, that just increases your stress, right? In fact, these are what the research shows in terms of the consequences of procrastination. There are some real mental health issues here, right? More stress, lower life satisfaction, more absences, less use of time and task management skills, and negative attitude about school. So there's some huge issues. Now, because we can get depressed thinking about that, I'm gonna take a detour and share one of the best uh, presentations I've seen on procrastination. It was there's a guy named Tim Urban who I don't know whether he still has this column, but he used to write a blog post called "Wait, But Why." And this one probably got more hits than any other because the wait, but why, the topic was why procrastinators procrastinate. Tim Urban is his name. This is a great one to share. It's got a lot of cartoons in it, so it's a really easy read. I don't know whether you can still track it down. Look at that. It's been 12 years or 13 years since it was written. But at any rate, I'll just show you some of the cartoons because here's the point he makes. He said, so this is what a non-procrastinator's brain looks like. There's a rational decision maker at the steering wheel in the brain, or at the helm, and the rational decision maker is saying, I do things that make sense. I think long term. I am not a child. And now I'm going to show you what the procrastinator's brain looks like. Again, the same rational decision maker. And he's saying, I have the same purpose as the guy in the above drawing. We are the same. But what's standing next to him? An instant gratification monkey. And it's the instant gratification monkey that draws the rational decision maker off task. And where does that rational decision maker end up? Dragged there by the instant gratification monkey, what Tim Urban calls the dark playground, which I think is perfect, isn't it? Anytime you have to do something, but you keep putting it off because there are other things you'd rather be doing, the entire time you're doing those other things that you think are more fun, there's this cloud hanging over you. It's a dark playground. My favorite, these are different games on the dark playground. My favorite one is looking at all 1,200 Facebook photos of a high school person you were never friends with Adventure Volcano. Okay, so there you are on the dark playground, but how do you actually get the task done? Well, guess who shows up? The panic monster. The panic monster shows up just before the deadline, scares the instant gratification monkey away, and now you can get down to work. So if you find this entertaining, Tim Urban did a TED Talk, which I highly recommend. This is the link to it. Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. He spent half the TED Talk talking about how he procrastinated on preparing the TED Talk. Here's one, and it's very entertaining. It's got some good laughs. But one point he made, which it took me a couple of times through viewing it for it to sink in, here's one point he made. We are all procrastinators, unless there's a deadline. If there's not a deadline, we're procrastinating. And so why is it that AP students procrastinate? It seems it should be the opposite. AP students are no different than anybody else. The surveys of college students show that 88% of college students say that procrastination is a problem for them. 46% say it affects their grades. Yeah, they do need to be disciplined. But nonetheless, they procrastinate and they feel terrible about it. So anyway, so one strategy around time management is to impose deadlines on yourself. I've talked with teachers. There's some state, is it New Jersey? No, I forget where students are allowed to continue to, because of the whole mastery approach to learning and the whole outcomes-based education, they can keep working at it until they achieve proficiency, which I know makes sense. But what they found is that it just encourages kids to procrastinate, or kids to do a sloppy first round and then clean up their act when they get some feedback about the first round. So they take a test and they fail it, but now they know it's on the test. And so even though I'm sure they wouldn't be given the same test, they feel like, okay, I can use that test to prepare for the next one. I teach an online coaching class, and a few years ago, I decided I have all adult learners. Everybody has their own busy schedules. I'm not going to impose deadlines. I assigned homework. I had units of homework that people had to do. They had to coach students and they had to give me feedback about how the coaching was going. And so one year I said, get them to me by the end of the class. That's fine. The class started in the summer and ended the following April. I had the worst homework completion rates of any time I've ever taught that class. So ever since then, I impose gentle deadlines. We are all adult learners, and so things come up. So if I said, if you hand it in after July 10th, you don't get credit for it. No, I don't do that. But I do say, here are my deadlines. Please respect them. Deadlines make a huge, huge difference. My own son, when he went to college. I have two sons. My older son diagnosed with ADHD when he was 14. And when he went to college, he would routinely pull an all-nighter to write a term paper, which if you have ADD, he had a good rationale for that. The middle of the night is the quietest time there is. There aren't other kids to hang out with. There aren't video games to play. That's a quiet time to concentrate. But what he found was he's pulling an all-nighter, handing the paper in the next day, and he'd get it back, and it would be riddled with mistakes, typos, poorly constructed sentences, whatever. And so because working in the middle of the night was still his preferred approach, He he pulled his all-nighter 2 nights before the deadline rather than the night before the deadline. And then he would use that one day before the deadline to do the proofing and editing that he knew he needed to do. So he imposed his own deadlines. So that's another approach. Um, okay, let's go on to strategies for time management. How can you manage time and not let time manage you? So because I'm pretty good at this, I talk to people. In fact, I was coaching a woman in her mid 40s a few years ago. Very bright woman, went to an Ivy League school, got a job in the State Department. It was a pretty responsible job. Um, Diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood, started taking medication as an adult, but grew up just managing somehow on her own, mostly because she was smart. Um, but she didn't, her sense of time, and this is true of people with ADHD as well. We sometimes call it time blindness. They don't have this clear cut sense of time. And this was true of her. And I remember at one point, her goal was to get her, I mean, she wanted to get her apartment clean, but we started small. And so she decided to start with the bedroom. And I said, okay, so because this is my 5-minute rule. I said, okay, so tomorrow, what is something you could do to tackle your bedroom that would take 5 minutes? And she said, I could make my bed. And I said to her, do you think that would take 5 minutes? She said, I don't know, I think so. And I said, I don't think it'll take 5 minutes. I think it'll take less than that. So once you've made your bed, what else are you going to do for the rest of the 5 minutes? And it's funny because I tell this story a lot in my workshops, and invariably there are people in my audience who look at me like, are you sure it doesn't take 5 minutes? So I've timed it. It takes 90 seconds to make your bed. Now, I suppose if you have fancy pillows, or I'm not talking about changing your bed. I'm just talking about pulling up the sheet, the blanket, and the comforter and putting pillows neatly at the bed, 90 seconds. But after I'd worked with her for a couple months, she said to me, and I would have her estimate how long things would take, and she was not good at it. And she finally said, I don't know if I'm ever going to get time estimation. So I thought, oh, if you have ADHD and you reach adulthood without learning about time estimation, maybe you can't learn it. And so I was talking with a friend of mine, school psychologist in Puerto Rico, um, and her name is Isabel, and we would meet at National Association of School Psychologists conferences. And around the same time I was working with this woman, I sat down with Isabel. We had coffee together one afternoon. And I said, Isabel, I'm working with this person with ADHD who can't estimate time. And maybe that's impossible once you reach adulthood. And Isabel told me that she had never been formally diagnosed with an attention disorder, but her daughter had, and her daughter was just like her. So she figured she would meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. And what she said to me is, okay, here's how I taught myself to estimate time. Actually, I wrote out the instructions. Here they are. She said I'd find a task I need to work on, and I'd set a timer for 5 minutes. And she said I'd ask myself, wonder how much I can get done in 5 minutes. So what I thought was masterful about her was she wasn't setting a goal. She was just being curious. Wonder how much I can get done in 5 minutes. And then when the bell rang, she'd reflect on, oh, let's see how much I got done. And then she'd set the timer for another 5 minutes and ask herself again, gee, I wonder how much I can get done in the next 5 minutes. And using this process over time, you learn two things. And this is all about time management, right? You learn how long 5 minutes is, and that's important. But you also learn how much you can get done in 5 minutes. And so she gradually had a better understanding of time because of that. So my favorite strategy for, especially where actually, this works for both task initiation and time management, having kids make a study plan where they list this is not where they write down the actual assignment, but it's like an expanded to-do list. They write down what they have to do for homework that night. No, math, biology, English. And then for each one, they answer 3 questions. How long will it take? So what are we working on there? That's time estimation, right? When will you start? That's my go-to strategy for task initiation. Make a plan with a start time. When will you start? And then where will you work? Well, that question is important because we want the person, as they're filling out this study plan, they need to be picturing themselves in that setting. Because the research on visual imagery and mental rehearsal shows that the more, if you mentally rehearse in advance carrying out a task, especially if you use vivid visual imagery, it makes it both easier to do the task and more likely that you'll do it. So if you have a kid answer those three questions about everything they have to do, we now have a package, right? We've got algebra. I've got algebra to do. I think it's going to take 30 minutes. I'm going to start at 5 o'clock. I'm going to work in the kitchen. And then the next column, write down the actual start and stop times. That's a check on two different things. Did you start when you said you were going to start? And were you accurate in your time estimation? And then check off when you're done. Okay, so just a few more strategies here. Visual cues. This was something that was a mom who came to one of my parent presentations. You can see 2019, so it's quite a few years ago now. She mentioned in the course of my presentation that because her kid had a really hard time keeping these schedules straight, so this is time management and organization and planning all rolled into one. She took a giant whiteboard with a calendar and posted it in a prominent place in her house. And at the beginning of every month, she did it for him. She set it up. This was a kid who had block scheduling. So he had A days and B days he had to keep track of. So you can see that he doesn't have the same subject 2 days in a row. At least not every week. She's got it color coded. So if he needs to check his email for assignments or turn in his homework through email, that's red. If he has to turn it in on Google Classroom, that's blue. If it's backpack papers, that's green. She's got like 8 dry erase markers. She's working off of 3 different class schedules or school year schedules. So I don't need to ask you what her executive skill strengths are. They're pretty obvious. But again, she put it in a prominent place. She wouldn't let him leave the house without checking that schedule. So if he just reads, oh, today is Wednesday, algebra, that's right. I forgot I did the homework 2 days ago, but I got to make sure it's in my backpack. So that's a strategy for both time and task management, actually. Here's a couple other strategies that I really like. A whiteboard planner, where you take a large whiteboard and divide it into columns. Now, this one it was shared with me by someone who's using it with an adult, but you can use this with a kid in terms of rather than goals, it could be classes, Spanish, English, social studies, whatever. And then all those colored squares and rectangles, those are post-its. So you're writing down the information on separate post-its. And then so the to-do column is everything you have to do for that. And then you spread it out. What am I going to do this month? What am I going to do this week? What am I going to do today? And then when it's done, it goes in the done column, which should be a source of some satisfaction. This other one I got here out of a book called, someone recommended it to me, The Unplanner's Planner. I forget, I can get the title, but this again uses post-its, and here it's a little different. To do, in progress, on hold, and donezo. So again, this is combining planning and time management. Another strategy is just start tracking time. And here are 3 different ways to do this. There's an online app. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the Pomodoro technique, but this online app, which you can download on your phone or it's on the computer. The Pomodoro technique it's a strategy for breaking tasks down into smaller pieces. The typical way you do it is you work for 25 minutes and then you take a short break, which is a 5-minute break. And then you go back and work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. And when you've done 4 of those, then you get a 30-minute break. Pomodoro is Italian word for tomato. The person who developed it used a tomato clock. You can purchase those if you want, but this is just as good. And what I like about this one in Pomo.cafe is the way to track it down. You can adjust it. If 25 minutes is too long, and for some kids and some tasks it would be too long, you can make it shorter. You can make the short break longer. You can make the long break shorter. However, you can adjust it to meet your needs. Um, Another option is using actual sand timers. I found this at Amazon, and you can see there are different lengths of time, 1 minute to 15 minutes. And so a kid could decide on any with 1 minute to 30 minutes. I think that's a 30-minute sand timer. So you can decide how long they're going to work and just turn over the sand timer. And when the sand's all the way through, then they get to stop, take a break, get a reward or whatever. There's also an app called Sand Timer, which is digital. And so there you can set the time. And once you start the time, those little squares, that's the sand, and they start drifting down to the bottom of the sand timer. And when they're all the way down to the bottom, you can choose whether you want a chime or a bell or alarm or whatever. Um, and then again, you can build in a break however you want it. Um, okay, a couple more ideas now. This one I think is really helpful. So, and, and this was the one that was created for those AP and IB students. Identify all the available time for schoolwork. And in particular, the most important message here is take advantage of transition times, lunch, bus ride to and from school, even if it's 5 minutes. A lot of people who have trouble with time say, oh, 5 minutes is not enough time. Why bother to do it? Someone in one of my workshops a couple of weeks ago said, what we tend to do is we overestimate how much we can do in a long period of time, and we underestimate how much we can do in a short period of time. So if you say, okay, I have all Saturday to get that done, and it's a major task, we don't get it done. But then we'll say 5 minutes, I can't get anything done in 5 minutes, when in fact we can get a lot done. So have kids think about when can they use 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there, 5 minutes there. Hone in on times you are most productive. We talked about that earlier in terms of finding your most energetic time, and then estimate the time needed for each task. And what they suggest is take every assignment, make an estimate, and then write down the reality. So you planned for the English essay to take an hour, it actually took 2 hours. You thought soccer practice was going to be 2 hours, but you forgot about getting to and from soccer practice is actually 2.5 hours. And so your bedtime, you planned to go to bed at 11 o'clock. In fact, you had to go to bed at 12:30. Now, if you want to take this one step further, um, uh, build in a fudge factor. This is actually a spreadsheet, which again, if you click here, I won't do it now because it'll move you someplace else. You can actually, it's a Google Sheets. You can download it. This is the example. First of all, if you download it, you have this page of directions for how to use it. You have an example, which I'm showing you here, and then a blank copy where you can try out the process and it'll compute it for you. So for each thing you're trying to track, you estimate the time you need. You write the actual start time, the actual end time, the actual time needed, and then what's the fudge ratio. So if you thought it was going to take 45 minutes and it actually took an hour and 15 minutes, then the next time you have a similar task, you multiply that 45 minutes by 1.67, and that will tell you how much time you should actually work on the task. Okay, it could be over, it could be under. But again, it's a little complicated, but it's kind of fun to sort of understand the discrepancy between how long you think something is going to take and how long it actually takes. Plan backwards. And kids who have trouble with time management, they may need to be walked through this because they may routinely, and again, more often than not, they underestimate. So let's say a kid is chronically late for school. When I need to be at school 8:15, how long does it take me to get there? 30 minutes. I need to leave home by 7:45. But what do I have to do before I leave home? I have to eat breakfast. That takes 15 minutes. I have to get dressed and washed up. That's 20 minutes. How long does it take me to get out of bed after the alarm goes off? 10 minutes. So what time should I set the alarm for? 7 o'clock. And so if you're helping a kid plan backwards, you may want to build in some cushion at every step of the way, so that if they're slower than they thought they were going to be, you've built in a cushion for that. Okay, I have a couple mantras for this as well. Oh, first of all, this is not a mantra, but it's something to think about. It's particularly helpful for people who procrastinate or people with problems with task initiation. And here it is. If you have trouble getting started, you made the first step too big. So think about that. What can you do to make that first step really small? I remember talking with a school psychologist who was working with a second grader named Dawson. And Austin had a hard time getting started on tasks, and they came up with a strategy which they called 1, 2, 3, S. And she sent me a handout that he had a form that he had filled out when he was setting a goal, and he'd listed 1, 2, 3, S's as one of his strategies that he might want to try. And I said, Dolly, what is 1, 2, 3, S? She said, oh, that's Austin's favorite strategy. It's 1, 2, 3, start. So you write down the first 3 things you're going to do, and then you start. So 1, get my math book out of my backpack. 2, turn to page 325. 3, put my name on top of the paper. So you can make the steps really small if getting started is hard, but so 3 small steps and then you're jumping into it. Okay. So here are my mantras. These are for kids who have trouble with time management or with procrastination because they're perfectionists. That my son, who was ADD and also had some anxiety. So if you're a perfectionist, you don't want to start, because as soon as you start whatever the task is, you're going to be flooded with feelings of failure, because you know you're not going to be able to meet the impossibly high standard you've set for yourself for what you want that final product to look like. So you put it off as long as possible. If you have ADHD, that task looks so boring and so deadly and so time consuming that you don't want to start either. So the way my son, I could start, but I know I won't be able to be perfect, so I don't want to start. So he finally said, you know what, done is better than perfect. Or someone in one of my workshops said this as well: good enough is both good and enough. So see if you can, and these truly are mantras. If you've got kids who are perfectionists, ask them to choose one of these and just remind themselves, you know what, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. Okay. Other strategies that people have for time management? Oh yeah, so mini deadlines. Nice. Caroline's describing interim deadlines or mini deadlines work for her son for sure. Okay, but does anybody have any other ideas for how they manage time? Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I always enjoy beating my own time. Yeah, so it's a beat the clock kind of thing. That's the easiest way I know of to turn something into a game, is just see if you can beat the clock. I have another friend who struggles with time management, and so I asked her what her ideas were, and she said that she does, she calls them price packs with her, like here are a couple of examples. With her son, she would routinely, when he was in high school, she was routinely late picking him up after soccer practice or whatever, and it was driving the son nuts. And they finally worked out a deal that for every minute she was late, she would give him $1. And so she said that worked really well. She says when she meets up with friends to go out to a restaurant or to go out for coffee. She says, if I'm late, I buy everybody else's coffee. If I'm on time, they buy me coffee, that kind of thing. My daughter is listening and says she focuses on one thing at a time and appreciates what she did get done. You have a smart daughter, which, so many kids want to multitask. but there's one thing at a time, get it done, move on, get it done, move on. And there's actually some research to show, it's in the response inhibition research, that if you have a bunch of different, like let's say you have 5 different credit cards you have to pay off, you're far better off. It works better if you pay off one credit card at a time rather than paying off a small amount for each, because you never get the satisfaction of putting that behind you. So I think that's part of what she's doing is she says, okay, I got this done. I can put that behind me. Um, okay. So I think that's the it. I do have, I'm open for questions or comments, but before we can get back to that, this is a QR code. If you want to download a copy of this, either you can go to, if you have Dropbox, you can go there, or you can do it on you can open it on your browser. Well, I'm also going to send Kathy a copy of the PowerPoint, and she'll get it out to people that way as well.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay.
You did a fantastic job, and it's actually my first experience moderating one of these where you did such a fantastic job hitting the questions as we went along, and I love the way that flowed. Um, I'd be interested actually if folks will please fill out the survey that you'll get tomorrow. I would love to know if that worked well for you as well, to have Peg do that as she was able, as opposed to holding those till the end. So thank you for doing that. That was a cool new experience. You A couple of things I wanted to hit on though.
Yeah.
An overarching theme in your presentation is helping students become self-aware and involving them in selecting that strategy to help compensate. So can you just revisit the importance of that idea and what can happen if we don't approach it that way?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. Because ultimately we want kids to be independent. We want them to be able to self-regulate. We want them to be able to set and achieve goals without us hanging over them. The only way they will get that is if we relinquish that control over them, so they take on more and more of that responsibility themselves. Um, it's funny. I was doing I teach this online coaching class, and one of the hardest things to get through, coaches get it, but they have a hard time persuading parents, because when a parent hires them as an executive skills coach, the parent knows what they want their kid to do. I want my kid to do this, that, and the other thing, and this is what you should do with the coaching. And it's for a novice coach, it's so hard to push back and say, sorry, you own the car, but your kid is driving the car.
Yep.
And you have to be, and I've just started using an example, which I think everybody can identify with. And that is, if my husband said to me, Peg, you've got osteoporosis, you need to do more weight-bearing exercises. So I think you should set up a schedule. So you're doing at least 3 days a week, you're doing weight-bearing exercises. Would I follow that goal? Absolutely not, because it was his goal for me. It wasn't my goal.
Right.
No, and there's no adult out there who wants a spouse, or and sometimes bosses do this. They set goals for people, but ideally you want to be in control of the goal. Um, and that works even better if you're involving the kid in figuring out what strategy will work for them, rather than saying, here, try this. Saying if you, and sometimes kids are at a loss for strategy. So, and I understand that. So we then recommend you ask permission. Yeah, I noticed you're having a hard time getting your homework done before bedtime. I've got a couple of ideas for how we might handle that. Can I share them with you and see if either one of them would appeal to you? And so if you make it more tentative, never give them just one choice, because then they'll feel like they either have to accept it or reject it, and then you get the
Hmm.
power struggle. But if you give several choices, and maybe none of these will work for you, but you know what? One of them might make you think, help you think of something that would work.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. The other thing, and I realize we weren't specifically talking about sustained attention tonight, but as you mentioned, it's an overlap, and you certainly mentioned sustained attention struggles when you were asked to clean your room as a child,
Right?
right? You mentioned to me not that long ago about an app put out by, it might have been Kansas University that
Yeah,
that help
actually, yeah,
that sets the tone off or whatever. And I really thought that might be interesting for people to hear about.
Yeah, there are two apps actually. Kansas State University, it's a self-monitoring app, and I can send you the link to that. The other one, which I've used more, which is, I mean, that one's free, but this one only costs $1.99. It's for iPhones, and it's called the Original Beeper app. Um, and it's basically you decide how long you're going to work. Um, and and then you decide that you want to get tones at random intervals, and you can decide, do you want them to come frequently or high, medium, low frequency. And then you turn on the app, you start your work, and every once in a while the tone will sound, and then the screen will change, and you have like 5 seconds to hit the circle in the middle of the screen to show that you're paying attention. And then at the very end of that work session, when you say you're done, it gives you a percentage. You are on task for 75% of the intervals. Um,
Nice.
and the Kansas
Um,
State University does the same thing, but this one might be easier to access.
yeah, it sounds like it. And Dara, thank you. She just put the link to that
Oh, cool.
original beeper app
Yeah.
in there. And I think I remember it was called iConnect.
Yes, it was. Yeah. If you Google iConnect, you can get to it that way. That's right.
Yeah, so that's the Kansas
Yeah.
State University one.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, you answered all of the questions. You did a fantastic job as always. It's always such a pleasure to spend an evening with you. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, those of you who attended and hung with us through the Q&A for your engagement with this. Hill is here to be a local resource for you. Also happy at any point to help out, especially with executive function skills. And we have an online course if you're interested in learning more and going deeper. And again, Peg helped to co-author that, so you'll get a little bit more Peg to help out with executive skills. So thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you again, Dr. Dawson, for a wonderful presentation. That and the presentation, the recording is going to come to you tomorrow in an email if you registered for tonight. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Likewise. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Yep. Take care.